Okay, so very nice to be back at Abhayagiri. I got back here Monday evening, so I was away for 4 months. Spent the Vasa away in the Pacific Hermitage. And this last week has also brought Ajahn Amaro visiting us. He just arrived last night. So the lineup on the live stream is a little bit different today. So Ajahn Dhamma is back. So that's the nature of, all existence. It keeps changing, keeps shifting. And certainly in the Sangha, comings and goings and movings about are not strange. I've certainly enjoyed the opportunity to be up at the Pacific Hermitage, where it's been established for 11 years, and I hadn't ever done anything more than go up for short visits to lend my support to different things. And so to be able to be a part of the community up there. Of course, one of the special features of the Pacific Hermitage is the alms round, going alms round on a, not quite on a daily basis, but sort of 5 days a week. So different alms routes through the town of White Salmon. And so getting to know the community. Ajahn Sudanto has done an admirable job of laying the foundations of the way of life, of being able to live as a samana, as a religious seeker, as a Buddhist monastic here in America. Years and years and years ago, Lupa Sumedho was once asked by Lupa Cha, would he ever go back to America and live as a monk? And he'd only been a monk for, 2-3 years or something like that. And Lupa Sumedho's response was quite strong. No, I'd never go. Couldn't live as a monk in America. You just starve to death. Nobody's Buddhist. It's sort of a negative perception, and of course, fast forward 50 odd years, and of course, Sangha in England and Europe and other countries, as well as here in America, is putting its roots down, and certainly having going on alms round is a feature. Here we don't, because we live way out in the countryside. It's not a daily thing, but we go every lunar observance day. Like today, they went in, and I've heard that in the time that I've been away, then I've changed the alms route in Ukiah so that it's 2 routes, because there's just so much food. People are incredibly generous, want to support. And to do one route, it's hard to do it in terms of time. So it makes it a lot more. Anyway, I didn't go today. I'm working on hearsay. But it made sense, certainly. It's been a while coming. But it just is that sense of, there is this support and generosity for supporting the Sangha. So there is an interest in principles of the Buddha's teachings, whether it's their meditation, mindfulness. There is a lot of interest in that, but also in the elements of how to plug in the ways of generosity, of giving, of sharing, and sila. Just like this evening, people come and requested to take the refuges and precepts. This is a fundamental foundation that is really important for the living a Buddhist life. And it's good to see this coming to be. But it's nice to come back after being in away for the summer. It's coming back into the midst of the sangha, midst of the community, the actual physical place of Abhayagiri. And it's just for someone who, one of the epithets of a say like a religious seeker or homeless wanderer for someone who is a monastic and without a home, this sure feels like home. So it's a nice feeling. And of course, having Ajahn Amaro visiting, and we spent so many years sitting side by side in the dining hall over there, and today having the meal, having tea time, and sitting next to each other in the hall. It's just had this sort of home feeling, or very familiar feeling. Quite lovely. I think of we were just mentioning at tea time that it's past 25 years since we established Abhayagiri, and time passes. But I think that one of the beauties of say time passing when one is living a really skillful life, there's a sense of real well-being, a sense of real kind of contentment and ease, and that's not the case for every human being. Oftentimes that's time passes and there's either regrets or confusion or various kind of issues that are cropping up, and certainly these days with kind of political, social contention, time passes, and that's not a wonderful experience. But living in the Dhamma and having an opportunity to maintain that kind of connection with the kind of the heartbeat of practice. When time passes, life goes on, change happens, but there's the fruits are those of clarity, of contentment, well-being, ease. It's a natural fruit of the practice of Dhamma. It's this Dhamma that the Buddha taught and the path that he laid out is one that it is pointing to relinquishment, pointing to a freedom from dukkha, and being able to actually let go of the things that sort of bedevil the human heart and make it complicated, make it difficult. It's such a wonderful opportunity. And it's helpful to have places like this in the sense of, say, a place of refuge, place of safety, place of where one enters into the space and one has a feeling of stillness, of settledness. I think that's the world is in need of such places, and certainly the physically. I think that Ajahn Amaro was mentioning today of how coming back and just how quiet it is, and that being in this physical environment, and that's been a feature of Abhayagiri from the very beginning. I spent most of my my early monastic life in Thailand and tropical forest and these forest monasteries in the northeast of Thailand, and they have many admirable qualities, but just the nature of a tropical forest is not all that quiet. Even if you're not next to a village that's blaring music or some kind of passing medicine show, but it even still just the nature of it's incredibly alive and vibrant and sort of almost vibrating with life and the sounds of the forest. And here there's a stillness to the forest and a stillness to the kind of nature around. I'm just seeing say like it's evening now or nighttime, and you go out and guarantee that the sky is going to be clear and the stars are going to be brilliant in the sky, and there's a sense of stillness and spaciousness and silence, and that having that external quality is really really helpful, because we do need the external supports. It isn't about just having external supports, but external supports are helpful, and having a quiet environment where we can come here, we can come to, and whether we're living here or whether we're live close by or whether have visiting from other places, come here, and it encourages us to turn to stillness and silence, and in particular to become familiar for ourselves and within ourselves of that kind of stillness and silence that is always there. Really, the nature of the mind, of the heart is, it is still, it is silent. We expend all sorts of effort to keep it busy and find things to fret about or find things to get obsessed about or find things to distract ourselves with. But that's us doing it. That's not its nature. And having an opportunity and having a place where we can rest in in the stillness and silence of the space, and allow the mind, the heart to feel, to experience, to taste the flavor of stillness, of silence. It's a gift to oneself, and to be generous with that gift. Don't be stingy with giving oneself that gift of silence and stillness, and learning to allow the heart to settle, and recognizing how we do trip ourselves up, and working with investigation. I think that's one of the things that, say, like Ajahn Chah was a great meditation master. He was incredibly skilled in having trained his own mind, but one of the things that he encouraged consistently was to reflect, to investigate our experience. And of course, the Buddha said that over and over again as well. But one of the things that we tend to assume is somehow I've got to force my mind to be still, or I've got to force the mind to be quiet, and of course that just never works. It's more like learning how to recognize it, and then learning how to lift up things within the mind that we turn attention to, so that it helps to settle the mind, it helps to the mind to release, or to kind of penetrate to the essence of the heart, of the mind, of this, the essence of this this teaching that the Buddha gave us, this Dhamma. And I think one of the, like, again, the sense of, we tend to keep like, what kind of, and it came up in tea time, and it comes up all the time. What kind of method? What's the right method? What's the right thing to do? What is the right techniques to practice with? And it's so much more dependent on how do we use the mind? How do we use the mind? How do we guide? How do we train the heart so that it sees clearly, so that it's not fooled, or it's not caught by its own delusions, and being able to just, there's many different angles and many different teachings that the Buddha gave, but I say one that comes to mind is the the 6 perceptions that are a basis for penetration, and of course perception is a fundamental part of our what the mind does. We perceive, and of course we think and we feel. There's feelings, but it's a part of the very nature of the mind, the function of the mind. But learning how to turn those functions to one's advantage, and so that taking a perception, the way we perceive something, but apply it with a Dhamma principle, so that the Buddha said, there's these say, 6 perceptions that lead to penetration. Of course, one is this anicca, anicca sanya, that perception of impermanence, perception of change, perception of uncertainty, perception of this is not a sure thing. This depends. We can describe it in different ways, but it's that or inconstancy. Things are inconstant, and because we tend to look at things through and perceive through our either our preference or our fears or our desire of how we want things to be, but to lifting up the perception of this is another impermanent phenomena. This is another uncertain, inconstant phenomena, and it's not a dismissal. And it's and if one's using it as a spiritual bypass, just slap the label on it. That's not its purpose. Its purpose is to be able to, rather than being caught by one's habits and one's biases and one's attachments, one seeing things through the lens of Dhamma, and that shifts the feeling, shifts the relationship, and we start to penetrate the essence of an experience. So that sense of impermanence, perception of impermanence, perception of dukkha, and again, it's not just slapping the label of, this is suffering, that's suffering, everything's it's more, when everything is so unstable, so unsure, can I really believe in that line of my biases, that this is what's really going to gratify, this is what's going to make me happy, this is what's going to really provide security for me. This is there's just the unsatisfactoriness of all phenomena, the unsatisfactoriness particularly of that which is changing, is unstable, is uncertain, and it is everything. It's like our certainly with our morning chanting, sabbe sankhara anicca, sabbe dhamma anatta, but also the Buddha's sabbe sankhara anicca, sabbe sankhara dukkha, sabbe dhamma anatta. All conditioned things are impermanent. All conditioned things are unsatisfactory. All dhammas are not self. It's just this is a fundamental truth, and being able to lift up that perception so that because how we perceive, and it's not just cognition in terms of perception, because perception also we're already placing a certain value on them. What importance is it? What is what's its importance? What is its importance? So then, looking at things through the lens of that unsatisfactoriness gives us the opportunity to relinquish, to let go, to not. And it's not so much a kind of a pushing away, but a releasing. Just letting things go back to their source. Yeah. And that's where there's peace, that's where there's stillness. That rather than grabbing onto every agitated thing and wondering why one's confused, is bringing up those perceptions so that there is a penetration into truth, and the perception of not self, and seeing the not self nature of things that are unsatisfactory. It's just why would one want to create a self perception in things that are impermanent, changing, unstable, unsatisfactory, fraught with suffering, and not worth it. And of course, on a logical level, you say, well, we can make sense of that. But that's why that's that training the heart to lift up a perception, refresh the mind so that the perception becomes fresh in seeing clearly, and the result is release. The fourth perception that the Buddha points to is the perception of pahana sanya, so that the perception of abandoning, and that's part of the duty that one has. Say in the Four Noble Truths, each of the Noble Truths has a duty, responsibility to perform to it, so that the second Noble Truth, the cause of suffering, and the Buddha pointing to all the different forms of desire and tanha, and said the appropriate duty or appropriate response to desire is to abandon it, to pahana, and so that the pahana side, the truth of abandoning, and so that being able to lift up that perception of abandoning, letting go, turning away from the habit of desire, and that sense of desire, clinging, and recognizing that that's what is creating, basically all the problems in one's heart. Remember one of the very earliest teachings that I heard of Ajahn Chah's, was I hadn't even gone to pay respects to Ajahn Chah yet, but there was a few of his teachings. It was just written on hand by hand. Somebody made notes, and they were in the library of the monastery where I ordained at, and it was just where somebody had come to ask Ajahn Chah, what basically had this question, well, what is what's the essence of the Buddha's teachings? What's the essence of the Buddha's path, and his path of liberation? And Ajahn Chah picked up something beside him. I can't remember. I don't know exactly what it was. Probably a toothwood, just because it would be handy to him. Picked up a toothwood and said, "Is this a?" Or it could have been a ringer for a bell or something. Is this a big piece of wood or a small piece of wood? And the person who was kind of confused, looked really confused, that they're asking this philosophical question of, what's the essence of the Buddha's teachings? And Ajahn Chah is asking him about this piece of wood, and he said. And finally, he was, I don't understand. And Ajahn Chah said, well, he said, it depends on your desire. He said, because if you wanted to build your house, or you wanted to fix something in your house, you'd say that this was a small piece of wood. But if you wanted to just sort of pick something small, and you wanted some little, kind of a toothpick thing, then you'd say, "Oh, that's too big," and that is how your whole life is created, and how you relate to it through desire. And the essence of the Buddha's teachings is to understand desire and to be able to abandon this unskillful desire, the desire based in clinging. So that pahana sanya, this perception of abandoning, is just so important. And of course, it's when we're able to abandon desire, abandon tanha. It's particularly because it's the desire that is inevitably bound up with clinging and suffering. When we abandon desire, it's not getting into a kind of a righteous war against desire. Just abandoning desire. That's where the heart becomes incredibly cool and steady, bright. The perception of dispassion, viraga sanya, this sense of there's a quality of cooling, fading away, allowing, which is another kind of translation of the word viraga. So one's dispassion, which is quite literal, but then it's a fading away and allowing our habits to actually fade away. Because so often, when we have an identity with our particular identification with our habit patterns in our personality and whatnot, we keep repeating them. We identify with them, we get tangled up in them. We do the same with projections of towards others. This person's like that, that person's like that, the world is that. And it's sort of just having that sense of dispassion and fading away. That's not buying into that whole process of proliferation and entanglement. And that's incredibly peaceful. And it's not peaceful because one's pushing anything away or annihilating it or destroying it. One sees its limitation and allows it to fade away. And that is an access to release. The last perception is a perception of ceasing, nirodha sanya, and that cessation, because that the nature of things, of course, is we get really interested in beginnings um, and endings. We don't want to pay that much attention to, but to pay attention to the endings, pay attention to the cessations, and of course that's whether it's our just contact around us, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, thoughts, feelings, they arise and they cease, and that's a completion, and allowing things to cease, allowing moods to cease, allowing the kind of views and opinions that come up, just allowing them to cease rather than getting caught in that perpetuating of the cycles of our the kind of the ongoing commentary about me in here and the world out there, and just allowing it to cease, that nirodha sanya, and it's incredibly peaceful, and it's that to be able to allow the heart to experience that quality of quiet, of stillness, of silence. And in doing that, as I said, this is an incredible gift to oneself. And it's a big gift to others as well, because there's enough people volunteering already to complicate the world, and it's just to have somebody who's willing to disentangle. It's of incredible benefit. So those are some thoughts for reflection this evening. Just encourage people to stillness and silence.